December 18, 1944. The morning fog clung to Bastogne like a burial shroud. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe stood in the basement of the Belgian Army barracks, studying maps that told an impossible story. Red circles drawn in grease pencil surrounded his position completely. 5 German Panzer divisions had closed their steel trap around his 4,000 paratroopers. The mathematics were brutally simple. Panzer Division pressed from the south with over 3,000 veteran troops and 80 tanks. 2nd Panzer Division sealed the northern approaches. 26th Volksgrenadier Division blocked the east. Additional elements of Führer-Begleit Brigade controlled every western road leading toward Allied lines. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. SS General Zepp. Dietrich's headquarters radiated confidence. His staff officers calculated that the surrounded Americans would surrender within 48 hours. Every previous encirclement in this war had ended the same way. Demyansk, Korsun, the Falaise Pocket. Surrounded forces always broke when the walls closed in and hope disappeared. The Germans possessed overwhelming material superiority. 15,000 troops against 4,000. 200 armoured vehicles against perhaps 20 American tank destroyers. Most critically, the weather remained overcast. No air support, no resupply drops, no hope of immediate relief. But through the pre-dawn darkness, something was profoundly wrong with the tactical picture developing around Bastogne. The paratroopers were not digging escape tunnels toward Allied lines. They were not preparing defensive positions oriented toward withdrawal routes. Instead, they were building interlocking fields of fire, registering artillery coordinates on every approach road, positioning their limited anti-tank weapons like chess pieces arranged for a complex endgame. The Americans had transformed their encirclement from a death trap into a carefully prepared killing ground. When German reconnaissance patrols probed American positions that first morning, they encountered defensive preparations that defied every lesson learned from previous encirclement operations. Every building showed signs of systematic fortification. Windows had been blocked except for narrow firing ports. Debris barriers forced attacking forces into narrow channels where pre-registered artillery could devastate advancing columns. Most unsettling of all, there were no visible signs of panic or preparation for withdrawal. The paratroopers displayed the confidence of troops who believed they held the tactical advantage. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The trap had indeed been set at Bastogne, but perhaps not in the way that German commanders had intended. The foundation of what would become one of the most devastating defensive victories in military history had been laid days earlier when the 101st Airborne Division received emergency orders to deploy to this obscure Belgian crossroads town. The division had been resting near Reims, France, recovering from 3 months of brutal combat during Operation Market Garden in Holland. Many soldiers were on leave in Paris. The division commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, was attending a conference in Washington. His assistant, Brigadier General Gerald Higgins, was in England. That left McAuliffe, the division artillery commander, in temporary command when the crisis erupted. McAuliffe was an unlikely hero for what was about to unfold. A 46-year-old artilleryman, he had graduated from West Point in 1918 and spent 25 years in relatively unremarkable assignments, perfecting the technical craft of indirect fire support. He was methodical, precise, careful. Not the swashbuckling airborne commander that popular imagination might have expected, but those very qualities, the patient calculation of an artillery officer who understood fields of fire and killing zones, would prove decisive in the coming battle. The journey to Bastogne itself had been nightmarish. 4,000 men packed into open trucks for a 107-mile drive through freezing rain and snow. They passed retreating American units heading the opposite direction, defeated troops warning them to turn back, that the Germans had Tigers and Panthers, entire divisions sweeping westward. The paratroopers ignored them and pressed on. They arrived without proper winter clothing. The division had been resting and refitting, expecting to spend Christmas in camp. Many men lacked overcoats, winter boots, or adequate gloves. They wore summer uniforms with field jackets, jump boots that would freeze solid in the coming days, thin gloves that offered minimal protection against frostbite. By December 20th, German forces had cut all roads leading into Bastogne. McAuliffe's force, supplemented by elements of Combat Command B from the 10th Armoured Division and various other units that had retreated into the town, totaled approximately 14,000 troops completely encircled. Outside the perimeter, 5 German divisions pressed inward with overwhelming material superiority. The Germans had tanks, artillery, ammunition, supplies, and time. The Americans had determination and something the Germans failed to recognize: a defensive position of extraordinary tactical value. Bastogne was not just any crossroads. 7 major roads converged on this small market town, roads that controlled movement through the entire southern Ardennes region. The terrain surrounding the town consisted of gently rolling hills and scattered woods that provided excellent observation and fields of fire for defenders occupying the high ground. Every approach road could be covered by pre-registered artillery fire. Every avenue of German advance led through natural choke points where American anti-tank weapons could achieve devastating effectiveness. McAuliffe understood immediately that being surrounded was not necessarily a disadvantage for a force occupying strong defensive terrain. Classical military theory teaches that attackers require 3-to-1 numerical superiority to overcome prepared defenders. The Germans possessed that ratio, but McAuliffe's defensive plan would multiply American combat effectiveness far beyond what German calculations anticipated. Lieutenant Colonel Ned Moore, McAuliffe's chief of staff, coordinated the systematic transformation of Bastogne into a fortress. Every building along the perimeter was fortified. Cellars became ammunition, bunkers, and command posts. Church spires became observation posts with clear views of all approach routes. Every major intersection was prepared as a potential strong point where defending forces could channel German attacks into predetermined killing zones. The positioning of American anti-tank weapons revealed McAuliffe's artillery officer mindset. 18 Hellcat tank destroyers were deployed at carefully surveyed locations around the town perimeter. These vehicles mounted 76mm high-velocity guns capable of penetrating German armor at ranges exceeding 3,000 yards. More importantly, their crews spent hours calculating range cards, identifying likely avenues of enemy approach, and preparing alternate firing positions connected by concealed routes. Technical Sergeant James Rodriguez commanded Hellcat No. 764, positioned behind the ruins of a Belgian farmhouse, approximately 2,000 meters from the main southern approach where German armor would inevitably attack. His gunner had already calculated range and deflection for every significant terrain feature within effective engagement range. When German tanks appeared, they would face precision fire from concealed positions before they could identify the source of incoming rounds. Supporting the Hellcats were 12 M4 Sherman tanks from 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B, supplemented by M36 tank destroyers mounting 90mm guns. But the true foundation of Bastogne's defense lay in its artillery. McAuliffe commanded 4 battalions of field artillery, 64 guns ranging from 105mm howitzers to massive 155mm long tom cannons. These weapons had been registered on every major road, intersection, and likely assembly area within a 5-mile radius of the town. The registration process was meticulous. Forward observers identified critical terrain features and approach routes. Artillery survey teams calculated precise coordinates. Gun crews prepared range cards showing exact deflection and elevation settings for each target area. When German forces attacked, American artillery could place devastating fire on pre-selected killing zones within seconds of receiving fire missions. This preparation would prove decisive in the coming battle. The psychological dimension of the defense began immediately. German reconnaissance patrols probing American positions on December 19th reported something unexpected. The paratroopers showed none of the demoralization typically associated with encircled forces. Instead, they displayed confidence, suggesting they believed they held tactical advantages over their attackers. Radio intercepts revealed American units coordinating defensive preparations with methodical precision, discussing artillery concentrations and fields of fire, with the clinical detachment of professionals executing a well-rehearsed plan. Sergeant Carwood Lipton of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment exemplified the attitude permeating American ranks. As he supervised construction of fighting positions along the eastern perimeter, his calm demeanor reassured younger soldiers under his command. The paratroopers understood that their reputation had been built on exactly this kind of determined defense against superior numbers. From Normandy to Holland, they had established themselves as elite troops, who fought hardest when circumstances seemed most desperate. The first German probing attacks began at 0400 hours on December 19th, exactly as McAuliffe had predicted. Panzer Lehr reconnaissance units advanced along the Arlon Road from the south, their half-tracks and armoured cars moving cautiously through pre-dawn darkness. What they encountered defied every lesson learned from previous encirclement operations. The lead German vehicle, a ST KFZ 251 half-track carrying veteran Panzer grenadiers, triggered the first American response at precisely 600 meters from the town's outer defensive ring. Staff: Sergeant Michael O'Brien of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment had positioned his bazooka team behind a demolished farmhouse, with clear fields of fire across the frozen meadow. The 2.36-inch rocket struck the half-track's engine compartment with devastating effect, transforming the vehicle into a blazing funeral pyre that illuminated the battlefield. But the destruction of a single reconnaissance vehicle was merely the opening note of a defensive symphony McAuliffe had spent days orchestrating. Within 30 seconds of the initial bazooka strike, pre-registered artillery fire began falling on the entire German advance. The 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion's 105mm howitzers had been zeroed on every likely avenue of approach. Each gun crew could place 18 rounds per minute on target with mechanical precision, creating a steel curtain that no armoured formation could penetrate intact. Colonel Fritz, Bayerlein of Panzer Lehr, had participated in the encirclement and destruction of numerous Allied forces throughout the war. His experience suggested that surrounded troops typically fought with the desperation of men seeking escape routes rather than the confidence of defenders executing a coordinated plan. Yet the American response demonstrated tactical sophistication, indicating careful preparation rather than improvised resistance. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Harper's 327th Glider Infantry Regiment controlled the eastern approaches, where the 26th Volksgrenadier Division mounted their primary assault. The German attack followed standard doctrine: infantry advancing under artillery cover to identify American positions, followed by armor exploitation once defensive weaknesses were located. Harper had anticipated this sequence precisely, positioning his heaviest weapons to respond to each phase of the German advance with overwhelming firepower. The effectiveness of American defensive fire created immediate problems for German tactical doctrine. Standard Wehrmacht procedure called for rapid penetration of defensive perimeters, followed by exploitation of breakthrough points with armored reserves. But the Americans had created a defensive system where every successful penetration led attacking forces into more concentrated fire rather than toward exploitable weaknesses. Technical Sergeant Rodriguez's Hellcat proved particularly devastating during these initial engagements. His crew had prepared multiple firing positions connected by carefully camouflaged routes, allowing them to engage targets from different angles without revealing their location to German counterfire. When the first Mark IV tanks of the 26th Volksgrenadiers assault gun battery appeared at 0730 hours, Rodriguez's gunner had already calculated range and deflection. The Hellcat's 76mm M1 gun could penetrate the Mark IV's frontal armor at any reasonable combat range. The first shot struck the lead tank's turret ring, causing a catastrophic ammunition explosion that destroyed the vehicle and temporarily blinded the crew of the second tank with burning fuel and smoke. Within 90 seconds, Rodriguez's crew had destroyed 3 German tanks and forced the remainder to withdraw beyond effective range. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By December 20th, the pattern of German failure had become unmistakable to commanders on both sides. Each assault began with artillery preparation that accomplished little against American troops positioned in reinforced cellars and improvised bunkers. German infantry advances encountered interlocking fields of machine gun fire that channeled survivors into predetermined killing zones, where pre-registered artillery eliminated entire companies within minutes. Armored vehicles that penetrated the outer defensive ring found themselves isolated and vulnerable to bazooka teams that had rehearsed anti-tank tactics extensively during previous campaigns. The logistics of the American defense revealed the true genius of McAuliffe's preparation. While German commanders assumed encircled forces would rapidly exhaust ammunition supplies, the 101st Airborne had accumulated sufficient stocks to sustain intensive combat for extended periods. Each rifle company maintained ammunition reserves calculated to support continuous combat for 72 hours without resupply. Artillery battalions possessed sufficient rounds to maintain defensive fires at maximum intensity for 1 week. More critically, the Americans had established an ammunition distribution system that functioned efficiently despite German artillery interdiction. Supply personnel used underground tunnels and covered approaches to move ammunition from central dumps to forward positions without exposure to enemy observation. This logistical capability allowed American units to maintain defensive fires at intensities that German commanders found incomprehensible given the tactical situation. The psychological impact on German forces became evident during interrogations of prisoners captured during failed assault attempts. Veteran Panzer grenadiers who had fought across Europe expressed confusion about American tactical behavior. Previous encirclement operations had typically resulted in rapid enemy collapse once attacking forces demonstrated overwhelming superiority. The Americans at Bastogne seemed to grow more determined, rather than more desperate, as battle intensity increased. By December 21st, German casualties had reached levels threatening the operational effectiveness of attacking units. Panzer Lehr had lost 37 armoured vehicles and approximately 800 personnel during 3 days of intensive assault. 26th Volksgrenadier Division reported similar losses among its infantry battalions. Most critically, these casualties included disproportionate numbers of experienced non-commissioned officers and junior leaders whose tactical expertise could not be quickly replaced. The ammunition expenditure required to maintain these assault intensities created logistical problems for German commanders that mirrored the supply difficulties they had expected to impose on American defenders. Each failed attack consumed artillery rounds and small arms ammunition at rates exceeding German supply capabilities. Meanwhile, American defensive fires remained as intense on December 21st as they had been during initial German probes, suggesting ammunition reserves far exceeding German intelligence estimates. The weather remained overcast, eliminating air support for both sides and reducing the battle to a pure test of ground combat capabilities. Under these conditions, the Americans held every tactical advantage except numerical superiority, and that advantage was diminishing rapidly as German casualties mounted without corresponding progress toward capturing the town. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Christmas Eve morning brought the first sustained artillery bombardment that German commanders hoped would finally break American resistance. At 0500 hours, every available gun in 47th Panzer Corps opened simultaneous fire on Bastogne's defensive perimeter. 120 German artillery pieces ranging from lightweight 75mm infantry guns to massive 150mm howitzers poured high explosive shells into the town at rates exceeding 400 rounds per minute. The bombardment represented SS General Dietrich's final attempt to achieve through firepower what previous assaults had failed to accomplish through maneuver. German intelligence estimated that no defensive force could maintain cohesion under such intensive shelling, particularly troops who had already endured 6 days of continuous combat without resupply or reinforcement. The plan called for a 2-hour artillery preparation, followed by coordinated attacks from all sectors simultaneously, overwhelming American defenses through sheer volume rather than tactical finesse. But McAuliffe had anticipated this escalation and prepared accordingly. During the previous week, his engineers had reinforced every critical position with overhead cover capable of withstanding anything except direct hits from the heaviest German shells. More importantly, American artillery had been positioned to respond immediately to German battery locations, identified through muzzle flash and sound ranging techniques developed during months of combat experience. The counter-battery fire that erupted at 05:15 hours demonstrated the fundamental difference between German and American artillery doctrine. German guns fired from survey-calculated positions designed to deliver maximum firepower against area targets. American batteries had been positioned for rapid displacement after firing, using techniques that allowed them to engage German guns and move to alternate positions before counter-battery fire could locate them. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Bastedo's 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion exemplified this tactical approach. His 12 105mm howitzers occupied 6 different firing positions connected by concealed routes, allowing gun crews to displace within 90 seconds of completing fire missions. When German counterfire fell on American positions, it typically struck empty ground while the guns continued firing from alternate locations. The effectiveness of American counter-battery fire became evident within 30 minutes of the German bombardment's commencement. Technical Sergeant Robert Morrison's gun crew had identified a German battery position through careful observation of muzzle flashes during previous engagements. When the Christmas Eve bombardment began, Morrison's howitzer delivered 6 rounds of high-explosive ammunition directly onto the German guns, before displacing to an alternate position. The resulting explosions destroyed 2 German guns and killed or wounded their entire crews. This pattern repeated across the entire battlefield as American artillery systematically eliminated German batteries faster than they could suppress American defensive positions. By 0700 hours, German fire had diminished noticeably as battery commanders realized that continued firing only invited devastating American responses. The bombardment that was supposed to prepare the way for German victory had instead revealed the superiority of American artillery techniques and the fatal vulnerability of German gun positions. The ground assault that followed demonstrated how profoundly the tactical situation had shifted since December 19th. Colonel Bayerlein's Panzer Lehr Division attacked from the south with 2 battalions of Panzer Grenadiers, supported by the remaining operational tanks from his armoured regiment. The assault followed standard doctrine, but the Germans now faced American defenders who had learned precisely how to exploit every weakness in Wehrmacht tactical procedures. Staff Sergeant William Guarnere of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment commanded a reinforced rifle squad positioned along the critical southern approach where Panzer Lehr would make their main effort. His position incorporated lessons learned from 6 days of continuous combat, including carefully prepared alternate positions and ammunition caches positioned to support extended defense against overwhelming odds. Most critically, Guarnere's men had rehearsed immediate action drills that allowed them to respond to German attacks with devastating effectiveness. The lead German infantry company advanced across frozen ground at 08:30 hours, moving in textbook assault formation designed to overwhelm defensive positions through aggressive maneuver, but they encountered defensive fire that seemed to anticipate every tactical movement. Machine gun teams had positioned their weapons to create interlocking fires that channeled German attacks into predetermined killing zones. Bazooka teams waited in concealed positions along routes that German armor would be forced to use. Most devastating of all, American artillery fire began falling on German assembly areas before attacking units could deploy into assault formations. Rodriguez's M18 Hellcat had relocated during the night to a position offering clear fields of fire across the southern approaches. His crew had identified likely German armor routes and prepared range cards for every significant terrain feature. When the first Panther tank appeared at 1100 meters range, Rodriguez's gunner already knew the precise elevation and deflection required to achieve first-round hits. The 76mm armor-piercing shell struck the Panther's frontal armor at an angle that should have resulted in deflection, according to German ballistic calculations. Instead, the round penetrated cleanly and detonated the tank's main gun ammunition, creating an explosion that destroyed the vehicle and temporarily stunned the crew of a second Panther, following closely behind. Within 60 seconds, Rodriguez's Hellcat had destroyed 3 German tanks and forced the remainder to withdraw beyond effective range. This tactical superiority extended across every aspect of the Christmas Day battle. German infantry attacks encountered defensive fires that seemed to intensify rather than diminish despite continuous combat. American ammunition supplies showed no signs of depletion, suggesting logistical capabilities that German intelligence had drastically underestimated. Most critically, American morale remained as high on December 25th as it had been during the initial German probes 6 days earlier. The weather broke briefly during the afternoon, allowing American transport aircraft to conduct the first successful resupply mission since the encirclement began. 16 C-47 transport planes dropped ammunition, medical supplies, and replacement equipment with precision that demonstrated careful preparation and coordination with ground forces. The sight of American aircraft overhead, even briefly, had profound psychological impact on both sides of the conflict. Sergeant Lipton observed the effect of successful resupply on his men's performance during the final German assault of Christmas Day. Fresh ammunition and medical supplies eliminated the resource constraints that German commanders had expected would force American capitulation. More importantly, the demonstration of American logistical capabilities suggested that the 101st Airborne was not truly isolated despite tactical encirclement. By evening on December 25th, German casualties had reached catastrophic levels that threatened the operational viability of attacking units. Panzer Lehr reported combat effectiveness reduced to 30% of authorized strength. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division had lost 40% of its infantry in exchange for tactical gains, measured in hundreds of meters, rather than breakthrough achievements. Most significantly, ammunition expenditure rates exceeded German supply capabilities, while American defensive fires maintained their devastating intensity. The fundamental contradiction that had defined the battle from its beginning had reached its inevitable conclusion. German forces possessed numerical superiority, but could not exploit it effectively against defensive positions that channeled every attack into killing zones covered by pre-registered artillery fire. American forces were outnumbered but held tactical advantages that multiplied their combat effectiveness beyond any reasonable proportion to their actual strength. The morning of December 26 brought the breakthrough that would transform tactical victory into strategic catastrophe for German forces. Major General Maurice Rose's 4th Armoured Division had been fighting their way toward Bastogne since December 22nd, encountering German rearguard actions designed to prevent any relief of the encircled Americans. Rose understood that his breakthrough represented more than tactical necessity. It would demonstrate that German defensive capabilities had deteriorated to the point where determined American attacks could achieve rapid penetration of positions previously considered impregnable. The spearhead of Rose's relief column consisted of Combat Command A, reinforced with additional Sherman tanks and supported by intensive artillery. Preparation. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams commanded the lead tank battalion. His M4A3E 8 Shermans were equipped with 76mm high-velocity guns capable of engaging German armor on equal terms. Abrams had studied German defensive tactics extensively and developed assault techniques specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in Wehrmacht anti-tank procedures. The German forces blocking Rose's advance represented remnants of units that had been systematically weakened by their unsuccessful attempts to capture Bastogne. The 5th Parachute Division and elements of the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division occupied defensive positions that should have been formidable under normal circumstances. But these formations had expended their best personnel and equipment during the previous week's fighting, leaving defensive sectors manned by replacement troops with minimal combat experience and inadequate heavy weapons. Abrams initiated his attack at 0600 hours, with artillery preparation that demonstrated American fire support capabilities at their most devastating. 18M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers delivered concentrated fire on German positions for 30 minutes, expending over 600 rounds of 105mm high-explosive ammunition with surgical precision. The bombardment targeted not just German defensive positions, but also communication centers, ammunition dumps, and command posts identified through careful intelligence analysis. The tank assault that followed revealed how completely American tactical doctrine had evolved beyond German defensive capabilities. Abrams' Shermans advanced in coordinated formations that provided mutual support, while minimizing exposure to German anti-tank fire. Each tank crew had rehearsed immediate action drills that allowed them to respond instantly to enemy contact while maintaining formation integrity and fire superiority. Technical Sergeant Frank Murphy commanded the lead Sherman in Abrams's assault formation. Murphy's crew had fought through France since the Normandy landings and had developed tank versus tank techniques that exploited the superior optical systems and fire control equipment of late-war American armor. When German Panzerfaust teams appeared at 200 meters range, Murphy's gunner engaged with high-explosive shells that eliminated entire anti-tank positions with single rounds. The breakthrough achieved by Combat Command A demonstrated the fundamental shift in combat effectiveness that had occurred during the Battle of the Bulge. German defensive positions that should have required prolonged siege operations were penetrated within hours by American forces that had learned to coordinate armor, infantry, and artillery with devastating precision. The tactical superiority that Wehrmacht units had enjoyed during early war campaigns had been completely reversed through superior American training, equipment, and doctrine. By noon on December 26th, lead elements of Rose's 4th Armored Division had established visual contact with American positions in Bastogne. The relief column's arrival represented more than tactical success. It proved that German forces could no longer prevent American operational maneuver even when defending prepared positions with adequate warning of impending attack. The encirclement that was supposed to isolate and destroy the 101st Airborne had instead become a trap that consumed German reserves at unsustainable rates. McAuliffe coordinated the link-up between his defenders and Rose's relief force with the same methodical precision that had characterized his defensive preparations. American units expanded their perimeter systematically, eliminating remaining German positions while establishing supply routes that would support continued operations. The logistics of this expansion revealed the extent to which American industrial capacity had achieved decisive superiority over German war production. Within hours of the relief column's arrival, transport aircraft began landing at Bastogne's improvised airstrip with supplies that exceeded anything German forces could match. Medical evacuation helicopters removed wounded personnel with efficiency that demonstrated technological capabilities beyond German comprehension. Most significantly, fresh American reinforcements began arriving in numbers that suggested unlimited reserves available for continued offensive operations. The psychological impact on surviving German forces was immediately evident through radio intercepts and prisoner interrogations. Wehrmacht units that had begun the offensive with confidence in ultimate victory now faced the reality that American military capabilities exceeded German capacity to resist effectively. The Bastogne operation had revealed not just tactical failure, but fundamental strategic miscalculation about relative combat effectiveness. Lieutenant Colonel Harper supervised the expansion of American positions beyond Bastogne's original perimeter, his 327th Glider Infantry Regiment advancing against German rear guards that offered only token resistance before withdrawing. The contrast with German offensive capabilities demonstrated during the battle's opening phase was stark. Units that had attacked with devastating effectiveness 1 week earlier could barely conduct organized retreats when faced with American counterattacks. The casualty statistics compiled during the relief operation provided quantitative evidence of the battle's decisive outcome. German forces had suffered approximately 7,000 casualties during their unsuccessful siege, including killed, wounded, and missing personnel. Equipment losses exceeded 200 armored vehicles, 600 wheeled vehicles, and countless crew-served weapons that could not be replaced given Germany's deteriorating industrial situation. American losses, while significant, remained proportional to defensive operations conducted from prepared positions against numerically superior attackers. The 101st Airborne reported approximately 1,000 casualties, the majority wounded rather than killed due to superior medical support and defensive advantages. Equipment losses were minimal and quickly replaced through American logistical capabilities that seemed unlimited compared to German resource constraints. Sergeant Lipton observed the final phase of German withdrawal from positions his squad had defended throughout the siege. The enemy forces that retreated through the Ardennes forests bore little resemblance to the confident Wehrmacht units that had surrounded Bastogne 8 days earlier. German equipment showed signs of intensive combat and inadequate maintenance. Personnel appeared exhausted and demoralized, moving with the mechanical compliance of troops who had accepted defeat. The strategic implications extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation around Bastogne. German mobile reserves committed to the Battle of the Bulge had been decimated by operations that achieved none of their strategic objectives while consuming resources that could not be replaced. American forces had demonstrated capabilities that suggested offensive operations could achieve rapid success against German defenses that previously seemed impregnable. Most critically, the battle had proven that American military doctrine, training, and equipment had achieved decisive superiority over German capabilities across every aspect of modern warfare. The encirclement of Bastogne, intended as the decisive blow that would split Allied forces and achieve negotiated peace, had instead become the demonstration of German military collapse and American ascendancy that would define the war's final phase. The dawn of December 27th revealed a battlefield transformed beyond recognition from the confident German offensive that had begun 9 days earlier. Across the Ardennes, the wreckage of Hitler's last gamble lay scattered through frozen forests and cratered fields, testimony to the complete reversal of tactical fortune that had turned encirclement into annihilation. SS General Dietrich's final radio transmission to Army Group B headquarters provided a stark assessment that contradicted every assumption underlying the offensive's planning. His 47th Panzer Corps existed only as a paper formation, its combat effectiveness reduced to approximately 15% of authorized strength through casualties that could never be replaced. The 5 panzer divisions that had surrounded Bastogne with such confidence now consisted of scattered remnants retreating westward without cohesion, equipment, or hope of reconstitution. The scope of German material losses defied comprehension even among Wehrmacht logistics officers who had witnessed the destruction of entire army groups on the Eastern Front. Intelligence reports compiled during the American advance catalogued wreckage that represented months of German war production: 347 tanks and assault guns, over 800 wheeled vehicles, 230 artillery pieces, and countless crew-served weapons abandoned when their crews could no longer maintain effective resistance. But the numerical statistics, devastating as they appeared, failed to capture the true significance of what had transpired at Bastogne. The battle had proven that German tactical doctrine, refined through years of successful offensive operations across Europe, could no longer achieve decisive results against American forces that had evolved beyond Wehrmacht comprehension. Every assumption about relative combat effectiveness had been inverted through American superiority in training, equipment, coordination, and industrial support. Major General Rose's 4th Armored Division spearheaded the pursuit of retreating German forces, with aggressive tactics that demonstrated American offensive capabilities at their most formidable. His Combat Command A advanced along multiple parallel routes, preventing German forces from establishing defensive positions while maintaining pressure that forced continued retreat under increasingly desperate circumstances. The pursuit revealed how completely American mobility had surpassed German capacity for strategic maneuver. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams commanded the lead elements of this pursuit, his tank battalion advancing with confidence that reflected fundamental changes in relative combat effectiveness since the battle's beginning. German anti-tank capabilities that had once posed serious threats to American armor now seemed primitive compared to American fire control systems and tactical coordination. Abrams' Shermans engaged German rear guards with devastating effectiveness, achieving kill ratios that would have seemed impossible during earlier phases of the war. The psychological dimension of German defeat became evident through prisoner interrogations conducted by American intelligence officers. Wehrmacht veterans who had participated in successful offensive operations from Poland through France expressed bewilderment at American tactical capabilities that exceeded anything they had previously encountered. The superiority in equipment, coordination, and logistical support that American forces had demonstrated throughout the battle represented technological and organizational advantages that German military doctrine could not counter. Sergeant First Class Robert Sink of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment participated in clearing operations that revealed the extent of German logistical collapse. Abandoned supply dumps contained ammunition and equipment that German forces had been unable to utilize effectively during their offensive operations. More significantly, the quality of German equipment showed clear signs of manufacturing, shortcuts and material substitutions that reflected industrial deterioration under Allied bombing campaigns. The strategic implications extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation in the Ardennes. German mobile reserves that had represented Hitler's last hope for achieving military victory in the West had been systematically destroyed through operations that accomplished none of their intended objectives. The Panzer divisions lost at Bastogne could not be reconstituted given Germany's collapsing industrial capacity and critical shortage of experienced personnel. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.